Keep your hands visible right now. Do not move.
Wait, what has happened? I just reached for my identification.
Turn around. Hands up.
Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back now.
What exactly did I do wrong to deserve this?
Chains over here. Copy. Got him.
Today, I'm diving into a story that hits hard. Can I unpack the layers of this crazy situation where a black grandpa was arrested just for being in a white neighborhood? Let's see what the jury had to say about it and how it all led to a $625,000 settlement. Before we dive into the details of this escalating encounter, or continue this necessary but uncomfortable journey, I would like to know where you are watching from. Drop your city and state or country in the comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. A simple 15-minute afternoon stroll cost a major American city precisely $625,000. This is the uncomfortable story of how the presumption of guilt became an official municipal policy. It is the tale of an ordinary man whose life was upended not by committing a crime, but by merely existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. We must confront the reality of profiling, a hidden tax paid disproportionately by people simply walking through neighborhoods where they are the racial minority. The truth is that dignity is priceless, but its violation comes with a steep penalty. Meet Elijah Vance, a man who had already completed his life's mission. He had spent 4 decades dedicated to the U.S. Postal Service, navigating icy sidewalks and scorching summer heat, ensuring every piece of mail reached its destination. He had earned his peace. Now at 68, his days were devoted to quiet joys, his church, his wife, and the boisterous company of his grandchildren. Elijah was a man of routine, integrity, and profound simplicity. He believed in order and mutual respect. This belief system was about to crash headlong into a system that only saw suspicion where there was only a grandfather taking a restorative walk. We must ask ourselves, what is the true cost of discomfort? What happens when a feeling becomes probable cause and profiling overshadows law? Elijah Vance was visiting his son Dorian, a successful software engineer who had recently moved his family into the affluent Oakhaven Heights suburb. This was a neighborhood defined by manicured lawns, silent streets, and an implicit, unspoken understanding of who belonged. Oakhaven Heights was pristine, and its residents demanded that it remain so. It was just past 1 p.m., the sun was warm, and the air was still. Dorian was at work, and Elijah, feeling restless, decided to take a slow, constitutional walk. He put on his favorite blazer, adjusted the brim of his hat, and stepped out into the bright afternoon light. He was just 2 blocks from his son's immaculate home, walking carefully, admiring the impressive architecture that lined the streets. He tucked his hands loosely, enjoying the quiet contemplation that only an afternoon stroll can offer. He had walked this exact route many times over the past few months, greeting the occasional dog walker with a courteous nod. There had never been an issue. But today, the serene quiet was a predator waiting to strike. At exactly 1:15 p.m. the quiet shattered, though Elijah did not know it yet. A resident, whose identity would later be fiercely protected, watched him from behind a sheer white curtain. The resident picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. The resulting complaint was breathtaking in its vagueness and its underlying prejudice. The caller described an elderly gentleman, black, walking around slowly, looked suspicious and unfamiliar. There was no mention of a broken window, no report of a suspicious package, no narrative of theft or even trespass. The only evidence presented was the perception of being unfamiliar. The only crime was not fitting the established visual profile of Oakhaven Heights. What started as a peaceful retirement walk was now documented in an official dispatch log as a high-priority disturbance. The call was coded and prioritized, sending 2 patrol units speeding toward the affluent neighborhood. The dispatcher provided the officers with the entirety of the evidence. A black man, elderly, walking slowly, unfamiliar. The implication, though unstated, was clear. He did not belong. The 2 officers assigned were named Reed and Kyler. They arrived in Oakhaven Heights not with cautious inquiry, but with the expectation of disruption. The city they served had trained them to respond to certain visual cues with immediate authority. They drove slowly down the tree-lined street until they spotted Elijah Vance, still walking slowly, still admiring the architecture. He looked precisely like the description, which was the entire problem. The patrol cars slowed abruptly behind him. The unnecessary flashing of blue and red lights cut through the afternoon sun, instantly transforming the quiet street into a stage for confrontation. When Mr. Vance heard the tires slow and the air crackle with official intensity, he turned, his face a picture of mild confusion. He was not defensive. He was courteous, expecting perhaps a request for directions or a warning about walking too far into the bike lane. But courtesy was not what the officers were prepared to receive. Before Elijah could speak, Officers Reed and Kyler had jumped out of their vehicles. They did not approach with questions, they approached with demands. Their hands rested conspicuously near their service weapons, a silent threat that immediately escalated the situation from an inquiry to a crisis. The two younger men aggressively demanded to know what he was doing on their street. The atmosphere changed instantly from peace to palpable danger. Elijah Vance was now officially suspect number one, and he still had no idea why. Elijah Vance, still confused but eager to de-escalate, spoke calmly. He explained his presence, stating clearly that he was staying with his son Dorian, just 2 blocks away. He offered the address hoping that the mundane truth would satisfy their heightened suspicion, but his explanation only seemed to intensify the officers' aggressive stance. They did not confirm the address. They demanded proof of identity. They demanded his wallet. This was the pivotal, tragic moment of instinct. Elijah, a law-abiding man his entire life, naturally reached inside his blazer for his wallet. This was a movement practiced millions of times by citizens everywhere, a simple, natural reach for identification. But in the charged, prejudice-fueled atmosphere of that moment, that simple, benign motion was interpreted as a hostile act. It was their breaking point, the instant they chose escalation over patience. The moment confirmed in their minds the need for immediate control. One officer roared, the sound echoing down the peaceful street. "Keep your hands visible, now!" Confusion instantly turned to terror in Elijah's eyes. He froze, his hands mid-air, a look of profound distress washing over his face. Before he could comply, before he could fully process the terrorizing command, strong, violent hands gripped his arms. He was yanked forward. His beloved wooden cane, which offered him steady support, clattered tragically onto the pristine pavement. The sound was stark and definitive. Faster than Elijah could comprehend, cold, unforgiving metal cuffs locked around his wrists, biting into his skin. Neighbors, drawn by the sirens and the sudden commotion, watched from behind their plantation shutters. Some even pulled out their cell phones, recording the scene. A 68-year-old retired man, restrained like a violent criminal, humiliated in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, solely for walking. The fear was overwhelming, but the humiliation was a deeper cut. As the officers aggressively guided the elderly, handcuffed man toward the rear of the squad car, Elijah's confusion finally broke through the terror. He looked back at the officers, his voice trembling but clear. He asked the question that laid bare the entire painful reality of the moment, the question that truly broke his heart. What exactly did I do wrong? He was begging for a rationale, a stated crime, a reason for the loss of his dignity. The officers did not provide a legal statute. They did not cite theft, assault, or trespass. The reply was cold, immediate, and utterly cutting. It confirmed his greatest fear, the underlying truth that defined the arrest. The officer looked directly at him and stated, "You generated suspicion by not belonging here." Elijah Vance was then transported to the local precinct. He was booked under disturbingly vague generalized charges, loitering and creating a disturbance. These were charges designed solely to justify the initial unlawful detention. He sat in a holding cell for hours, the shame and shock permeating every minute. He was processed, fingerprinted, and treated with the cold institutional indifference reserved for hardened criminals, simply because his presence offended the aesthetic sensibilities of a single resident. Finally, late that evening, he was released. He was never charged with a genuine crime. The prosecution quietly dropped the flimsy charges days later. The city hoped the incident would simply disappear, fading away like a bad memory. But the memory was etched into Elijah's soul. His family urged him to focus on recovery and move past the injustice, but Elijah knew he couldn't. He refused to let this act of dehumanization stand. "If I let this stand," he insisted to his son, his voice heavy with righteous determination, "they'll do it to the next person. They will do it until someone tells them no." Elijah Vance was a retired postal worker, not a legal titan, but he possessed an iron will forged over decades of quiet diligence. He filed a lawsuit alleging racial profiling, unlawful detention, and violation of his constitutional rights. The burden of proof would be heavy, requiring him to challenge the entire municipal structure and the ingrained bias of the police department. But Elijah was undeterred. This was not about money. It was about dignity and institutional accountability. The legal battle was protracted, draining both financially and emotionally. The city initially fought back fiercely, citing officer safety and reasonable suspicion to justify the aggressive approach. But during the crucial discovery phase, the defense's narrative began to crumble. This was the moment of truth, hidden deep within digital files. The body camera footage was subpoenaed. The body cam footage provided irrefutable evidence. It confirmed the officer's immediate aggression, the lack of any verbal warning, and the frighteningly quick deployment of handcuffs. More damningly, it captured the audio of the resident's vague complaint relayed over the radio, confirming that the entire basis for the stop was a racial description and an emotional assessment of being suspicious without a single crime being committed. The footage showed Elijah's face, not the defiance of a suspect, but the profound confusion and terror of a 68-year-old man realizing his constitutional freedoms meant nothing in this neighborhood. The footage provided the silent, objective testimony that Elijah needed. The truth was now laid bare on a cold screen for all to see. The case finally went to trial. The courtroom was silent as Elijah Vance, dressed meticulously, his posture straight despite the weight of the moment, took the stand. He spoke softly, detailing the minutes of the encounter, the terrifying rush of adrenaline, the bite of the handcuffs, and the profound, intense shame of being paraded as a criminal in front of watching neighbors. He detailed how the incident had shattered his peace, replacing routine contentment with chronic anxiety and distrust of authority. Then he delivered his closing statement, not as a legal argument, but as a plea for human empathy. He looked directly at the jury, his voice steadying. "I ask you only this," he requested. "If I had looked like the people who called the police, if my skin tone had matched the houses on that street, would I have been treated the same way? Would I have lost my cane? Would I have been booked for walking?" The jury deliberated for days, struggling with the ingrained complexities of policing bias versus civil rights, but the cold evidence of the body cam footage and the crushing reality of Elijah's testimony were undeniable. Their decision was resounding and definitive. They found the city liable. They recognized the trauma and the unlawful arrest for what it was: a grave injustice fueled by racial profiling. The verdict was a loud, clear declaration that existence is not a crime, and dignity cannot be erased by a badge. Mr. Vance was awarded $625,000 in damages. The money was a settlement, a necessary penalty, but the true victory was the official recognition of the wrong. The quiet man who only wanted peace forced a major city to admit its failure, proving that sometimes the most profound victories are won not with physical force, but with unwavering moral courage. Justice in this case wore the face of a 68-year-old retired postal worker. Do you think justice was served by this verdict? Let me know in the comments below. If you have thoughts on this case or similar stories, I'd love to hear them in the comments. For more videos on social justice topics, be sure to check out my channel, and let's keep the conversation going. Kindly subscribe, like and share for this video to go viral. Thank you.